This is the new Hydra ice tool from Black Diamond. This is the result of sort of decades of experience, but at least 3 years of really concerted R&D, field test, deep dive into like what makes ice tools work and what are people doing today. Most people have kind of converged around an offset grip tool suited to the most difficult terrain they would encounter. And by that, I mean, if you're going to Alaska and you're trying the, sort of the hardest route you can personally imagine, it's unlikely that you're going to choose a tool that's suited for the easiest parts of that route and maybe not as good for the hardest. On the other side of the spectrum, it may be all you do is climb in Ouray or climb water ice in Bozeman or Canada. And in that instance, you want the tool that does that job the best. So if we said, hey, what can meet that most extreme use, but also have some versatility to go across sort of the spectrum of ice and mixed terrain, that's how we came up with this. And really that versatility comes from the way we've configured the head. Like you can imagine, the weight and the weight distribution on an ice tool is super critical to how it works. Intuitively, having a lot of weight on the bottom and no weight on top doesn't make for a very good hammer. By the same notion, all of the weight on top tends to make that tool move around the head in a way that can sometimes not be that comfortable for actual climbing in the field. Through a lot of work and a lot of field testing, a lot of math, but also a lot of like, I don't think that's working. We came up with this configuration where we put the head weights sort of at this very specific location in the head. It's not the center of mass of the tool, but it defines the center of mass of the tool. And you can put pick weights on, or you could put weights on the shaft. People have tried tons of things over the years. And we found that this spot in a very small region is the best location to define sort of the center of mass of the whole tool. So you can see these silver weights here. There's one on each side. There's 2 different weights. These ones are made of a tungsten stainless steel fused together to make this sort of a remarkably heavy little washer, basically. Very special washer. And then you can take one or the other out and replace it with an aluminum one that comes with the tool, or you can put 2 aluminum spacers in. And that gives you a massive range of weight difference in the head. Sort of like, if I recall, the aluminum ones are in the 30-gram range, and the heaviest ones are in the 80-gram range. So this massive change, and swinging out at the end of the tool, it makes a huge difference. Another place where we've really sort of created a lot of versatility, on this backside, you can use this micro hammer. You can use a full-size hammer or a to-be-coming adze. The adze comes out in the fall of 25. So we offer 3 different picks. One is the ice pick, the mix pick, and then the dry pick. We've put the most, I would say, mentally and sort of in terms of resources, we've put so much work into these picks between the material, the heat treat, the manufacturing, the geometry, like tons of iterations to get here. The ice pick is remarkable in that it's incredibly thin. And the work that we've done pretty much supports what is intuitive, and as thin and small as you can make that pick, the easier it's going to place in pretty much all ice conditions. The problem is, even in ice and hard ice, you can bend picks, removing them. Obviously, you can bend them on rock or cracks. So we've gone to a really unique heat treating process that makes these picks, there's a lot of technical sort of engineering words that the team uses. I would say they're just tougher than nails. And the difference being, you can create a pick that's very hard and it'll bite into ice, and you can make it very thin and it'll be strong enough to place in ice. But as soon as you torque it, it'll bend and stay, or it'll break. And so what these are is they're more springy. For the same hardness, they're tougher. And that's due to a pretty specific and challenging heat treat process. And you can see the really cool detail on the inside of this. These holes are all keeping the weight in the best possible location. This pick is super thin. I think it's 2.5 millimeters at the tip, which is kind of the thinnest ice pick we've ever done. All of this geometry, this sort of nearly razor sharp edge on the top, is about cleaning. The thickness, the height of this is all about placement. You can see the hammer fits into this really specific slot here. ice pick doesn't have the comb. What we find is with the comb, if you really bury it, it tends to be really hard to clean. The other picks, the mix pick is really similar, climbs ice really well, but is a little bit more beefy for even more climbing on rock. It has the comb on the top. It has a different configuration of those holes, and that's because the pick is heavier. So we add a hole back here to balance that weight out, as well as these depressions in the side. Sides are scooped in, same thing, keeping the weight balanced. And then the dry pick, you've got this really distinct hook on the front, which originally was designed around a specific ball hold in competition. But after using it, we realized that that hook is really awesome dry tooling, especially natural rock, where that hook is just able to go in places that you otherwise couldn't. And you can see the dry pick has this giant comb on it for stime pulling, and a lot of feature on the bottom. And it's super thick, beefy. You can do anything you want with that. For decades, BD has done a stainless steel head configuration with stainless plates holding the pick on, really specific pick attachment geometry. This is the first time we've moved away from that since maybe the 80s. And part of the reason for that stainless was just to make sure that the head was as beefy as it could be. And at this point, the tools we have now to design and develop and test, the analysis tools, have made it so that we can make this head meet all of the test requirements that we ever were able to with stainless steel. And a lot of that is about if you beat it against rock, if you torque it this way, all the different configurations that you can imagine breaking this meets all of our requirements that we've had for stainless. The aluminum allows you to put the weight where you want it, because if it's lighter, then you place the weight versus the weight being defined by the geometry of the head. Shaft's hydroformed aluminum, got some profile to it. It's got a nice profile in this direction, so you can grab it. You can dagger with it. Really designed for clearance around ice and really optimized swing. All of this stuff kind of boils down to really optimizing the swing and how the tool places in ice. Then the grip, the profile matches the shaft, rubberized on the bottom. Put a lot of time into making sure these were comfortable, accommodating different hands, different preferences for those shapes. Ice climbers, you'll see they often modify this or they wrap it. Trying to find the perfect combination that pleases everybody is obviously not possible, but I think we found the best compromise. And the feedback that we've gotten has been that the grip is super comfortable, easy to control. You can see it's molded over this aluminum, and then the lower pommel, you can pull it off and put either 0, 1, or 2 spacers for different hand sizes. This is the micro spike. You can put a cord to put leashes on this, or if you choose, you can use the alpine spike, which gives you a little bit more on the bottom. So if you're plunging, but also you can put leashes on it. This also serves to kind of protect that end of the grip. There's a lot in here that's sort of invisible. This aluminum reveals a little, but the grip is actually a super tough nylon substrate with a rubber coating on the outside. Same with the pommel. So the rubber sort of is in all the contact surfaces, and then where the tool, has this potential to get beat against rock or ice, that's where the nylon, it's glass-filled nylon, is exposed. But it's actually on the inside as well. So this whole thing is aluminum, a coat of nylon, and a coat of rubber. Especially at Ouray or something where the ice is really picked out, it's really often taking the brunt of the force. So that thing has a little bit of aluminum up inside of it. And then this aluminum piece stops right here, and this whole assembly is glued up in there. And so to make this thing strong enough, when you pull on it, like this aluminum part is critical. Otherwise, if it was just plastic, it would break. The other part is to put that bolt in, you need metal. With all the different geometries, this is a 4mm and this is a 5mm. There's 2 lines that you kind of go down when you talk about the head weight. One is just that straight, I'm swinging, and how hard is it to accelerate the tool? And then once it hits the ice, how much sort of oomph does it have? I think no matter what sort of strength you're at, if you're on the ground and you're starting your swing, and those heavy head weights will feel really easy because they're so heavy. Once you get the tool going, man, it really sticks. Now, put yourself, 100 meters up and swinging over your head, and that head weight starts to feel cumbersome. And if you're tired, too much weight can be a real problem. So for different, it's not so much like, oh, I'm a big burly guy or I'm a really small climber that defines that. It's really, what is your swing weight? If you are really sort of forceful, and some of our athletes, some of our users tend to just swing with a real authority, and that's a style. And then others climb with real like precision and sort of almost dainty, and that's, look, they all do the same stuff. So that head weight allows you to accommodate those different use cases. And then at our level, I'm more of everyday type of climber. I find that the heavy weights are just too heavy, and they make you tired. And then so you can pick an intermediate spot. The other thing is, if you're mixed climbing, in terrain that's unfamiliar, or if the ice is really featured, you often find yourself swinging this and moving it above your head, and that extra weight tends to really matter, and you can really feel that weight. So we find that people that climb mixed terrain or dry tooling go with the light weights, just because you're holding it over your head and you're often kind of pecking and searching with the tool. So that's where the weights really matter. I would say if you're specifically headed towards a route that has even a few meters of rock, the mixed pick is probably going to be a better choice than the pure ice pick. But if you're climbing pure waterfall ice without hitting rock, this is definitely the choice. And most people, they'll compromise towards easier placement. We see with our athletes, they tend to just be super careful, but keep the ice pick in just because it's so much easier to climb ice with. Our new mix pick, actually, I would suggest, climbs ice about as well as a normal ice pick, because it is quite thin, but compared to the ice, it's a bit beefy. What has been unique is that throughout the process, we've worked really intensely, meaning in person, on the phone, with a few key athletes, Will Gadd being one of them. He's a pretty remarkable ice climber, and Will is an incredibly astute technician. Like, he spends time thinking about all these things, and that feedback has been really helpful. We would make picks, send them straight to Canada, and have Will, he would be sending feedback within a couple of days because he climbs so much. We also have a climber colleague up there named Rafael Slavinsky, who is also a great sort of counterpoint to Will, in that he's a much more, even though he's like a physics professor, he's very, he talks a little bit more about feel and not angles. He's a very technical, in that spectrum of climbers that are very deliberate and very like forceful. Will is in that camp. Climbers that are really delicate and sort of, I would say, kind of graceful, and not that Will isn't, Raf is in that camp. So taking those two counterpoints and applying it to these tools, like Will is all about the heavy weights, and Raf is all about the right combination, the mix and the match. Over the past 3 seasons, have spent tons of time with these. We've also had them in Europe with our athletes there, and then more sort of everyman, many climbers around Salt Lake, Bozeman, the Canadian Rockies, just getting out and A, trying to break them, and B, just like, this is a pretty competitive spot for such a low volume product, and we want to make sure that we're actually making something that matters, something that's good. And we made some carbon fiber versions of this. And the intent was like, hey, let's build a carbon fiber version that uses all these parts and all this advantage, and maybe we shave a bunch of weight out of the shaft. That was a pretty intensive and interesting sort of science experiment. And what we found is that to make that carbon fiber live in this environment, because it's not like a bicycle, this is something that you hit intentionally. You hit against things intentionally. So the amount of work that we have to put in to make the shaft and the head and all this stuff really durable makes it so that carbon fiber has to be kind of thick. And so what we did is built this carbon fiber shaft, a few iterations, and we made it, and it turned out to be an incredible simulation of this hydroformed aluminum shaft. So it was like, wow, that's not really adding anything to the world if we make something that is carbon fiber just to be carbon fiber. Not saying the jury is totally out on carbon fiber, but I think that This is an amazing solution to this problem, and it happens to be aluminum. This is really kind of the pinnacle ice tool. We have PLAs and Venom. So the Raven and the Venom are PLAs that kind of go mountaineering, less technical terrain, more snow walking. Then we have the Venom LT, which is a very light, sort of a ski mountaineering and very light alpine tool. The Viper is a straight shaft alpine tool that is much more versatile in terms of like heading down onto the flatter terrain. Maybe a beginner would use that, but it really has this versatility around it, but doesn't quite have the advantage of these. This one, in terms of technical terrain, is the hardest routes in the world, and then that ability to come back to where the Viper is, like Alaska, the Alps, anywhere where the terrain kind of warrants this sort of technical clearance, versatility at the tippy top. This is like a halo product for us. The things that it come with are basically this configuration with the small spike, the small hammer, and then both weight sets, and then the ice pick. And then you can buy separately the alpine spike, or the hammer, or the adze that's coming.